there are only so many different facets of your own personality that you can get to when you find yourself repeating yourself. So it's at 83, Paul Newman reveals Hollywood's old gay actors he secretly dated. Have you ever imagined that? Behind Paul Newman's quiet blue eyes and impeccable demeanor, the man admired across America as the ideal husband star and icon lay unspeakable secrets, 6 loves, 6 men, 6 separate chapters in his life that he never shared with anyone until he was about to die. In the summer of 2008 in Westport, Connecticut, Paul Newman lay on his sickbed, his body weakening from cancer. Every afternoon, he quietly asked the nurse to place an old Panasonic tape recorder by his pillow. Not to write a will, not to reminisce about his glorious career, but to confess for the first and last time the feelings he had to keep hidden his entire life. So who exactly were these names, and why did Paul keep them hidden until he was near death? We'll start with the first name he mentioned, none other than Marlon Brando. Marlon Brando, a love story, drowning in lust and suffering. They first met in 1961 at a fundraising gala at the Beverly Hilton Hotel. Paul arrived with his wife Joanne Woodward, as always elegant and well-groomed. Brando, on the other hand, arrived late, walked in with a wrinkled shirt, eyes half joking, half cold, and stood behind Paul throughout the party. "I thought you'd be as boring as in the papers," Brando said when he struck up a conversation. "Turns out you're the only one here who isn't pretending." And Paul, who always kept his distance from flowery words for the first time, did not object. From coffee dates in Westwood, to nights strolling around Silver Lake, to sudden unannounced flights to Palm Springs, an unnameable bond began to form between them. Paul loved the way someone serious about their feelings does. But Brando didn't. For Brando, everything could be a role, even love. He didn't love like ordinary people. Paul said in the August 3rd, 2008 recording, "He pulled me out of my familiar world, then dropped me into rooms with people I didn't know, situations I didn't understand, and gazes I couldn't control." The meetings Brando took Paul to, often at discreet villas in Laurel Canyon, or short-term rented apartments in Venice Beach, always involved directors, journalists, producers, and vague promises of new films, awards, fame. Initially, Paul thought they were parties. But then he realized he was just a part of Brando's behind-the-scenes scripts, where all eyes were on Marlon, and Paul was just a supporting character kept as long as he was useful for media pushes. Worse still, it was Brando who leaked information about Paul's private letters, soft, emotional, trusting, handwritten notes to photojournalist Mark Weller, a gossip reporter who supplied stories to the Los Angeles Mirror. In 1960, this newspaper unexpectedly launched an anonymous column called Love Behind the Lens, telling the story of a famous Venice Award-winning male actor torn between family life and a secret relationship with a dark-haired film icon. Everyone implicitly understood it was Paul. Only Paul didn't suspect that Marlon himself had left that envelope at the newsroom's reception desk. 'Cause Brando needed a scandal. He needed to be talked about. He needed the media to dig up old photos, to stir up old stories, just to ensure the name Marlon Brando never left the public's mind. And Paul, who once loved, once trusted, once kept silent, became the price to pay for Brando's fleeting existence. What made it all the more painful was when Joanne, Paul's devoted wife, accidentally found a copy of that letter in a bookshelf. She said nothing. She just quietly left Paul a small note. "If you need a refuge, I'm still here. But if you need another lie, I'm not the one who can help you." After that came a long winter in Connecticut. Paul didn't leave the house for weeks. According to his daughter, Nell Newman, that was when her father often woke up in the middle of the night, quietly walked out to the back porch, and smoked alone in the biting cold. No one asked, but everyone knew. Near the end of the recording, Paul said, "I once thought that if I was patient enough, if I loved him long enough, I would make him change." But Brando didn't change. He only knew how to turn every true emotion into a tool for survival. And I let him turn me into that tool, even when I knew I didn't deserve it. And then his voice dropped like a sigh. I loved him in a way no one should love anyone. The story with Brando didn't end with an argument or a breakup. It ended in silence, when Paul stopped answering calls, stopped writing letters, and stopped believing that love could change people. But he never stopped agonizing. But not everyone hurt Paul and left. There was one person who entered his life not as a lover, but as a violent storm of possession and power. Someone who publicly defended him and then used that very protection to control everything. That person was Steve McQueen. Steve McQueen. When love is a fire that burns both. Steve McQueen. That bastard. Paul Newman blurted out that phrase as if compressing a lifetime of anger into every word. It wasn't just anger over a word and action, but anger over an entire past, manipulated, suppressed, and burned in a passionate yet suffocatingly toxic emotion. They first met backstage at the Photoplay Awards in 1956. Paul was already a family man, while Steve was just a young man honing his reputation in small television roles. But the way Steve looked at Paul, defiant, raw, and possessive, made him unable to turn away. Soon after, brief encounters turned into clandestine meetings lasting hours at the Chateau Marmont Hotel. Paul once said in the recording, "I thought he loved me, but then I realized he just needed someone to prove he could own even Newman." When Confidential magazine published rumors in 1962 that Steve McQueen had an unusually intimate relationship with a male actor in New York, Steve immediately reacted. Less than a week later, he was seen hand in hand with Anne Margaret at the War Lover premiere. At the same time, Paul was asked to sign a non-disclosure agreement presented by Steve's own lawyer. "You know what happens to people who get exposed, right?" Steve whispered as he handed over the paper. "You have a family. You have a daughter. Don't let everything fall apart just because you're too weak." He didn't just pressure, he erased all traces. With money, with lawyers, with hidden connections in the media. Once Paul accidentally discovered an expense of over $15,000